and welcome to another interview edition of Tech Boss China. A few weeks ago, I was listening to a podcast about the data security issues with Temu. And one of the people that was being interviewed was Vincent Nys, a Belgian IT expert who had researched the Temu app when it came out. Initially, he had found a lot of problems with the app and he'd been keeping a close watch on it. And one of the things that I noticed in the interview is that he mentioned that the app had really improved. But the interviewer completely skipped over this. And I found this very interesting. So I got in contact with Vincent to discuss this and to maybe ask if he would want to go and have an interview with Tech Boss China so he could explain that side of the story. Because on the one hand, I think there are things that we should be worried about in a Temu app, but on the other side, we also get a very one-sided story in most of the mainstream media. So in the interview you are about to see or listen to, if you're listening to this as the podcast, I'm talking to Vincent about what he found in the app, but also very interestingly, how he's actually cooperating with Temu to improve some of the issues that were found. I think that when you listen or watch this interview, you will be quite surprised, as I was. Depending if you are on the positive or the negative side of the scale, I think there's something surprising and interesting that you'll find in this interview anyway. So without further ado, let's have a look at Vincent Nys. Okay, Vincent, welcome on Tech Boss China. In a very
I
special place you are, right?
Yes, I'm in the car. Sorry for that, but I'm not driving, so all safe here from my end.
Okay.
Thanks for
So,
having me.
yeah. Vincent, we're going to be talking about Temu and especially about data security and those kinds of issues. Maybe you can start by introducing yourself.
Yes. So my name is Vincent Nys. I'm in technology for the last 15 years, technology and marketing, and we do a lot of let's say security and compliance research for public companies or for private companies.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it was in March this year when you were in the news and all kinds of news media in Belgium and the
Yeah.
Netherlands, I think internationally probably as well. And that was about the research you had done into the Temu app, right?
Yeah, correct. So yeah, it exploded a little bit beyond our expectations, but it was from a Flemish research group. They made actually a program about TikTok, so it was nothing to do with Temu. But then, of course, China comes in, and then they were comparing like what are the different Chinese apps which we have on our phone, and they had like done previous editions of like how these modern apps or of social media apps are changing our privacy and how they are handling our data and what are the profit models of those kind of applications. And then of course they're looking to China because it's rising and there is a lot of negative connotations or publicity around it. So that's what was the reason or the intention of the investigation.
Yeah, yeah. So and you started that yourself on your own initiative, or you were asked by this group to do that?
No. Yeah, I was asked. I was asked. So they found some information online regarding, for example, TikTok. There was a court law order in US. They were banning as well in the European Union. There was a time where a few months before, same as TikTok, was removed out of the app stores, and I think Temu as well, like the previous version or the Chinese version of Temu was
Into the
removed out of the yeah, indeed, was removed out of the app store. So that raised some questions about how safe are they.
Yeah, yeah. So, and I think the version that you researched, the first version you researched was like 1.55, right?
Yeah, something like that,
Yeah, yeah.
1.4, 1.55. So if you
So,
see in the last 6 months, there are way more versions. I think they're releasing one every week or every 2 weeks, which is a good thing. Uh, But that initial version, yeah, there were some flaws as we identified, and there was a website which published a very let's say destructive report, and we tried to verify those claims. So that was
Hmm.
the main goal of the research,
Yeah.
verifying the majority of claims which were out, because there was a lot of fake news, there was some truth in that, and so we tried to research what was the reality and where were the improvement points.
Yeah, yeah. So in that first version that you researched, can you tell us some of the things that you found which you consider to be very worrying?
Very worrying, let's state it that way, is uh, we looked from it from a European point of view. And so I think that is a very important thing to start with. Like, what are we used to? And I was in app development for many years. So we developed a lot of, let's say, mobile applications and software applications for the European market. And we have always a kind of methodology where privacy by design. You only ask for data that you need, and that's also like how Facebook evolved over a lot of years, where you saw a lot of big scandals. I think with the elections, where a lot of data was stolen or was passed to third parties. So Europe did a lot of efforts to invest money into like GDPR and like regulations on how to handle users, let's say, credentials and like credit card information, but also like very personal information. If you allow someone to work with your data, it's only that person. And so it used to be that Google and Facebook were reselling your data and they're making a lot of money on your on your, let's say, behavior or your persona. And then we had a lot of rules and implementations, and suddenly there were Chinese apps which don't always follow or play by the same rules. And then that's what we investigated. And there were some things in the code. So first of all, what you can do is, if you can, all the apps, they have a public source code, so you can decode the source code and you can look into the mechanics how it works. So that's actually what we did. Also, we placed it's a little bit technical, but we placed a man in the middle. It's like an attack, how you can see which data is transferring from your phone to an external server. That was also one of the points. Like, we have rules that data needs to be stored in Europe. It can't be stored in China. Um, and we wanted to investigate, like, okay, where is the data flow going to? Which is the data you put into it? What permissions are they asking? And we found some things, like, for example, instead of just checking your active Wi-Fi, it was downloading the Wi-Fi list. So like all known public Wi-Fi's you're connected to. It was checking in the background if you have the right access rights, which is not so strange. You build in those kind of mechanics to validate, do I have the right access rights? Else you show a pop-up, hey, enable notifications, for example. Like every app does that. But they did it in a kind of, let's say, sleeky way, which is not so super transparent, where they checked, do I have admin rights? Then I don't need to ask anything and I just enable everything. So like
Hmm.
stuff like that. So we are used to having a very transparent way. Think about if you use Waze, they say, hey, we need your location and we need it for this and this and this reasons, but you don't need to enable it. You can enable it or push it in the background. So it gives you a choice, or the illusion of a choice, let's say it that way. So it's informing and giving a user a choice. With that first version, we didn't find a lot of choices. They were like enabled by default. And then, for example, a contact list, they would grab your contact list and send them on a regular way to an external server.
Hmm.
The strange thing is as well that they encrypted the full source code. So they spend a lot of effort in trying to hide the mechanics. That's also strange. Like, normally bank apps are doing that, but like all other apps, they don't spend effort. Like even Amazon or TikTok or any other app, it's not spending effort in trying to hide the source code. So that was like one of the points where it raised some interest, like, hey, okay, what are they hiding? And then we search a little bit further. And I must say, it's on the old version, and it's mainly for Android because iOS built in a lot of security features. But in Android, there was one feature which was a little bit tricky. And you can state that it's maybe a small part of being too fast, why it still remained in the code. Maybe it was not intentional, but there was a part where you could externally load code in. So you can inject code remotely.
Hmm.
It's quite strange that you're put into a shopping app. an execution of a process which can be triggered externally. And you can give a lot of explanations. We did it for a development phase and stuff like that. But normally it will never pass in a European mindset. It will never pass. Then, for example, access to your SD card, like full write and read permissions of SD card. So all those permissions are still within the limits of what a mobile app can do, because that's what a phone can do. But then if you think to our European logic, like only request the data that you need, why should you access photos? You can say you only need it on the moment that, for example, you send back a package and you say, no, I don't want it from my library, but I want it from my SD card. But then you only ask for the permissions. But they wanted to have everything from the beginning. That was quite strange. As well, it was not there was no difference between children and adults, which is also quite, in Europe there are a lot of rules. You can't like grab data from children and do something with it, so there was no protection. In the later versions we saw that they added a lot of, let's say, additional checks if you're a child, but very, let's say, amateurish. Very, very like a basic developer. If child, don't collect.
Okay.
Very Chinese. So there were some things where you can say it's a little bit tricky, and I'm not. That's also what I would try to state very clearly. But media make their own story, of course. All those things separately are not so worrying, but all the things together, and the fact that you don't know where your data is going to, that is a little bit worrying. And then the fact that it's a foreign government. I mentioned it in the pre-interview that people have a disconnection with our own government. So we don't trust our government. So we never going to trust a foreign government, and especially not if it's like a communistic government who at any moment can say, dear private company, I want to access the data. So there is a lot to say about like, okay, we don't know what they're collecting. What are they collecting? Why are they trying to hide it? Why are they needed to grab so many permissions? Why it's not needed for a shopping app? Is that does that a little bit answers your question?
Yeah, it makes me a bit more worried about the app now. I talked to you about this, but I think later on we'll get to how they made some improvements, right?
Yeah, sure.
I mean, this version, around which time was this?
I don't know by heart, but I think it was the version of February, March, something like that. We we have we have all the versions, and the cool thing was actually the report that an external company, and it was also a little bit fraudulent company who made the report, because it's Grizzly reports. You can search
Oh
it on
yeah,
online, but they have a very negative connotation. Why? Is because they influence public stock markets by publishing a
short
negative
sellers.
story.
Yeah.
Yeah, and short sell indeed. But the fact is that they were quite transparent. So they shared source code, they shared the code lines, and we reviewed that. So we verified their claims. In some parts, there was really the exact line was the same. So we could verify a lot of. The only thing is the report is written in a way where it gives also a lot of very bad connotation from the start. So it's written in a very negative way. But there were some, to be honest, there were some truthful elements in the report.
Yeah.
So there the version is noted. I think it was 1.4, 1.5, and it was just after the ban of their Chinese clone company, like the mother company where it originated from. And that's what you see in the source code. So you see that it's actually like a real cheap clone where they
Yeah.
just copy pasted some blocks. And it's a very quick go-to-market strategy. What you see there, it's just a refurbishment of an existing code where we will add some limitations for Europe. We can't use a Chinese server. You will use a server in Singapore, and we will. But if you then search for the location of the data center, it was still like the main company. So
Yeah.
which was then like listed fraudulent. So back then there were a lot of, let's say, worrying elements where also Google blocked them at some point, where they said this code is not safe.
Correct.
And then they
Yeah,
made
yeah.
improvements, and then they like fixed it somehow,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
that version was not so okay.
But this then was the version of February, March
Yeah,
2023, right?
yeah,
So they
correct.
were operational for about they launched in September 2022. So say about half a year. So around the time that they also started
Yeah,
advertising on the Super Bowl.
yeah.
Yeah.
And we saw some, because we tested a few versions. We saw some, like the note I mentioned regarding the children. Like at some point there was suddenly a version where if child, then don't collect this. So you see, like I
Yeah.
think that they changed gradually based on like very bad publicity, especially US. There were a lot of like concerns in US. Uh, so they changed quickly. So they also have a quick adoption strategy to change those things which were not so correct. And also
Yeah.
they fixed the things because else they weren't like in the app stores allowed anymore. So the version which was in the app stores was allowed in Europe. It's
Mm.
only doubtful, like why do they need all the information, and what do they need? What do they do with the information? That was like our question, which is still not answered today.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think one of the things you mentioned is that what happens quite often in China is to launch something that is not quite there yet, which is not quite finished, and in China they even have a name for that. Chabudo. It's like it's not quite done, but it's good enough to launch. So not a minimal viable product, but just not yet quite viable product. So that's what they tend to do. So what they probably did is just take the Pinduoduo app, the domestic app, and just create a new front end. And then basically launch it. So one of the things we also described at one of the Temu reports we did on TechBots China is that somebody of TikTok actually said what Temu is doing is they're getting on the bus and buying the ticket later. Whereas TikTok is
Very cool
doing
expression.
the yeah, TikTok is doing the exact opposite because they're under such a magnifier glass. There's so much attention on what they're doing that they first try to get all of the compliance right before they do something. Whereas Temu just wants to launch very quickly with an app that is not finished yet, and then when people start to complain, then they'll figure out compliance later.
Yeah.
So
When
I,
I from an innovation point of view, I totally get that. I think we live in a world where technology is evolving so fast. Look to AI. It's like an uncharted territory. So you need to be fast, you need to launch fast, and I believe that there is a need for fast launching concepts without thinking too much about a lot of rules, but still we have a playing field. We have some rules. We have some basic
hmm,
things where we need to take it into account. And it's not like we collect everything and then later on we will see what, because we already evolved as well as the species. We already learned from previous mistakes. And
hmm,
like Facebook was one of the things where we say, okay, if we're now building something, we're going to make sure that it never happens again, that we will give one company the power that knows everything about us, and Google as well. Like we all played the trick. Like I mentioned it before, like if it's free, probably you're the product. But it was
hmm,
with Gmail. Like everyone wanted the free Gmail account and they gave away everything to Google. And then suddenly, after like 10 years, everyone was complaining, like Google knows everything. Yeah, but we all we all agreed to it. And
yeah,
it's okay. It's okay. I don't care as long as you're transparent about it. As long as you can say, I'm giving you a free service and this is what you give in return. And then it's fair. Like if it's weighed in a fair level, then it's okay if you get cheap products and you need
yeah,
to give it away a little bit about your privacy, then why not?
hmm,
But we need to be open and transparent.
yeah.
So I think we could learn from China how we can launch faster, and they could learn from the West,
Yeah.
like
Uh,
how to play at least by the rules and think about the interest of your end user instead of your own interest. I think that is a little bit how I see it, but it's very personal opinion.
right. Yeah. If we look at some of the things that they were doing in that app, so which we could basically say is like the Pinduoduo clone that they launched in the
Yeah.
West as well. I mean, why would they want to do stuff like check a list of Wi-Fi networks that you're accessing? Why would somebody want to
Oh,
collect that data?
I can only guess, but coming from before, I did a lot in advertisement as well. Like the more, let's say, you get the bigger value out of your persona of how your ad profile is, the more you know about the person. Like, and location is not always
Mm,
accurate. Like you know a street, but you don't know the exact house. But if I know my detected networks and like three neighbors, they know the detected networks, and you know like the RSSI, you know the signal strength you have, you can pinpoint an exact location. So based on that's also why it worries security analysts. Maybe it's not their intention to do that. They just
Mm.
collect everything because it's launching fast.
Yeah,
But from
yeah.
a security point of view, it's if you put the puzzle together and you have from one data point, you have all the data signals, and you know, like, okay, this neighbor is X amount of meters from the router, and this neighbor is X amount of meters from the router, and you see the same kind of networks colliding, then you have like a full view on the street.
Mm.
And that's a little bit the issue these days is if I consent, it doesn't mean that my neighbor consents. So
Yeah.
even someone then that doesn't have TikTok, and it I think it occurs in the episode of the Flemish TV, is like children install the app on the parents' phone, or TikTok the same. And
Mm.
suddenly you have an app who's running in the background and is doing stuff at the background, which you don't know or where you didn't really give permission to, and which is not transparent because you don't know what it's doing. Because some of the code that we found was like an interval data point where they send some data encrypted, so you don't know what are they sending. So, and it's also like, why does a shopping app needs to have an interval? Like, hey, I'm alive.
Mm.
Why do they need to have those kind of, you see? So it's, and it can be all very reasonable, explained in a very quick launch development state. But if you're scaling up to that kind of level, then it's important to take those things into account because it will raise a lot of red flags.
Mm.
Maybe unintentionally, but you need to solve those kind of things.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. One other thing that really stood out is that I think you found that in the early versions of the app, they actually unlocked it at night to record audio. Was that one of the things?
No, there was a little bit in media how they misperceived it. So there is a call, but a lot of apps have it. It's called wake lock. It's preventing your phone to going in lock mode. And at night, it runs background tasks. So it's
Mm.
it's a different thing. They have the permission to record audio. They have the permission to execute programs, and they have the permission to wake lock. But it doesn't mean that they will enable your phone at night and record your audio. That is,
Yeah.
of course, the very strange narrative. But technically, if you're a hacker and you have bad intentions and you work at Temu, in that version, in an Android phone, so in a very ideal situation, and then still, what do you get out of it? But you could technically inject something which enables an audio recording, and that was a little bit like the case, and that is for security. I'm not the super security researcher, but for security researchers, is if that mechanic is in place where it's possible, who says that it doesn't happen? I'm
Yeah.
more from the realistic point of view where I say, okay, but what would be the benefit? What would they get out of it? I don't believe that it's the intention. But there were
Right.
some things which, why does a shopping app needs to record your audio?
Mm. Yeah, yeah.
And those for me are hard to explain. Like I can't find any reason, logical reason. Maybe in China it's a different
Hmm.
culture where you can order things by voice, and then it's perfectly reasonably explained.
Yeah.
But in Europe, it's not the case. And oh, you're using it. There are no features in the app to do so. So you can say camera. Okay, if there is something damaged about my product, I take a picture. It can be stored to my SD, so you can explain that. But like audio, why do you need audio?
Yeah,
Why
yeah.
do you need a Wi-Fi list? And why do you need my contact list? I'm not going to share you anything within the app. It's not a sharing app.
Hmm.
Because if you
Yeah,
share
maybe.
something,
Yeah.
like it pops up, like share with
Right.
WhatsApp, or you're not sharing within Temu. Maybe it was their intention in the beginning to create an app where you can have friends and share within friends. So that actually was the beginning of Temu. It's like sharing good deals with friends.
Yeah.
But then suddenly, I think over the course of the trajectory, they saw, hey, but you already have like those 20 different platforms like Messenger and Facebook and whatever, WhatsApp, Viber, whatever channel you want to use. We're not going to use our internal list, but still the feature was in to, hey, we will use your phone list.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, like you said, there's some things that I can imagine why it would need to access your contact when you need it. I mean, if this is copied from the Pindodo app, in Pindodo, there's a lot of gamification that also lets you
Yes.
contact your friends to download the app, to play a game together with you, to buy something together. The initial intention, if you look at the name Temu, actually stands for team up. It was team up, price down. So there must
Together.
have been a point where they were considering to also do group buying. So I can imagine needing needing access to your contact list, but sending over your whole contact list to an external server. Is that what happened?
you saw that it accessed your contact list and you saw that it sends an encrypted message, which is different if you add your change data on your phone, the size is different. So it's encrypted, so you don't see the exact package that they're sending over. But we saw in some cases, for example, normally an app has always some diagnostics. So as a, let's say, a software supplier, which version the phone is using from which IP address, but it's like only once they install the application, but they send it constantly. Like in every call, they're sending, like, even, for example, the list of apps. That's what we saw. That is what we proved as well. Like, which access rights do we have on that specific phone, and which software do they have installed? So that's strange. Why do they need to know? And I get it from a marketing point of view. You want to know, am I competing with Shein, yes or no? Of Shine. Sorry, how do you
Yeah.
pronounce it actually?
Shein.
Shine?
Shein.
Shein. Shein.
It's an abbreviation of, it used to be called She Inside, and
Shein.
they
Okay, that's
abbreviated that to Shein, and now everybody says, here in the Netherlands, they all say Shine.
Shine. Yeah, that's why. That's why it's always hard. But like, and I get it from a marketing point of view. You want to know your competitors, but
Mm.
in Europe, imagine that you have a business and you're not telling people like, "Hey, I'm going to scrape to see."
Yeah.
Like, it's more trustworthy if you just ask, "Hey, are you also using one of these?" It's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're willing to share this kind of things, but it's the idea of control, and it's the idea of, I will decide if I give you this information, yes or no. If you take it, then a lot of, let's say, from a European point of view, you're like mishandling my trust, something like that. And that is,
Mm.
I think, where a lot of the distrust and disbelief came from.
Yeah. Yeah. I can totally understand that. The other thing that I was thinking about, if you access pictures or access camera, in China, it's actually very common to search for images. So you actually take a picture of an object and you see if you can find it cheaper online.
Yes.
So those are use cases that I can imagine this
Can be
this
applicable.
access.
Can be
Yeah,
applicable. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Now, one of the interesting things is that after all of the media attention, you've actually been working with Temu to improve some of the problems that they run into, right? Can you maybe
Yeah.
tell us something about the cooperation you have?
Sure. I was a little bit stunned as well, because suddenly I was getting like Chinese LinkedIn requests, and I thought, okay, they were going to at some point they were going to be angry, but they were super open, super friendly, in a way of, we only have good intentions. And I believe that. I really honestly believe that they have good intentions and that they are willing to do everything what is needed to build a great customer experience app. Uh, the only thing is, and it's also cultural wise, that they send me a lot of proof. Like, why are they not not what we mentioned, and why the acquisitions were false, and that the report was from a fraudulent company? Is that they say,
Mm.
yeah, but no, we have this security certificate. So I think in September, last September, no, where was it? No, in February of this year, they got MASA certification of Google. It's a security certification you can get. And it's like a typical thing, like it's a patch on a wound where you can say, oh,
Mm.
I have something. I will make sure that I can find some uh, governance agency, which it's just an agency which you pay a lot of money, where they do some compliance checks, where they say, is your code safe? Is your
Mm.
code encrypted? Is your code? So they have like a checklist, and they got the certification. So they said, yeah, but we are all safe. And I said, no, this certification is bullshit, because this certification proves everyone can get those kind of certifications, but it proves that you spent effort in protecting uh, let's say the privacy of your user. Yes, your app is encrypted and you did it on a good way. That is not the point. The point was, like, you spend now a lot of time in protecting everything, and we are not saying that you're not doing enough to protect end users. I believe that you're doing enough to protect end users. It was just like your intentions are not clear. The way how you do your marketing is a little bit sketchy, or not what we're used to, and you're requesting more permissions that are needed. So the certification proves a different point, is that you spend time and effort in protecting the application itself, but not in protecting the end user. It doesn't answer the question, what are you doing with the data? How are you making money? And why are there still some, let's say, uh, security flaws which could be impacted if or which could be misused if someone had malintentions. The same as I gave the example in Europe, you have mostly a split of responsibility and a split of data ownership. So, for example, in a bank, I worked in a few banks. There is no one database where you can just edit a record and say, now I have 1 million on my account. It's a 4i principle where multiple people and it comes out of multiple databases. With this is not the case. So it means that everyone within the organization or every one of the 100 developers can just access that kind of data. That would never be possible in a European kind of way, because we have seen a lot of failures in the past with people selling your data, and it doesn't mean that Temu by default is doing that kind of intention. But I believe that if someone has malintentions, imagine a low-paid developer who's getting fired who says, okay, I'm going to take the whole database and I'm going to sell it to someone. You see, so those were some of the concerns. So they showed me a lot of documents. We had a quite open discussion where I stated them very frankly that it was bullshit. But they were okay with that. I expected them to be angry or threatening, or no, they were trying to prove to me that they were doing everything in their possibility to improve, and that they were open to listen, that they were happy to listen to my improvements, that they didn't want to bribe me off. So they didn't even offered me money to say, you need to say this on paper. They just asked me, like, review the next version and please give us your improvements and say us where we can improve. And that's not what I expected. My initial expectation was they're gonna threaten me or they're gonna try to bribe me, but it was not the case. They were super cool in terms of, this is what we are doing right now. We are hiring ethical hackers. We are creating a bounty program where if you can find a flaw, we will give you money and we will fix it. If you have any improvements or if you have any marketing recommendations, we will do it. So I think from a, let's say, product strategy point of view, it's brilliant. This is the way how you should deliver products. Listen to your audience, be open to feedback, be critical, and let your say criticos be open to feedback and listen to them and engage them in an open talk. And that's what they did. And I think it's cool.
Yeah. Would have been nice if they did that before launching, but
that's a different thing. Yeah. But I think that is where the cultural difference is, and the way how they launched, like you mentioned before.
Correct. So are you also sort of advising them on things that are not right and that they need to fix, or?
I can't say a lot about the full content of the assignment, but one of them was, for example, validating all the claims that the third party was doing. So very openly just verifying the claims and giving them some security and compliance advice from a European point of view. And it's open to them what they do with it, but I have the intention, or I have the feeling now that they just want to prove to me, like, this is what we are doing, look how good we are doing. And it's more like open validation, but it's perfect. I don't need a lot of compensation for it. I don't need like I think it's cool if you see change and that you see that there is a willingness and it's openness, that they open the dialogue, because I think that is the only thing what was needed, was listen to your target audience and see how can we improve.
Correct. Yeah. So, and have you seen a lot of improvements since that 1.4 or 1.5 version that you first evaluated?
Yeah, I must say I didn't check the last versions of the last months, but like 4 months ago, I think there was a recap version of the television show where we saw a lot of things were already removed. I think like the microphone is removed, like the ability to take screenshots now. Now also they ask the rights, and if they ask the rights, now you have a pop-up. Why? And they improved that. They improved some small things in the UI. Where if you, for example, the strange thing was before, if you disable all the access rights, the app would still work. So that was also one of our points. Like, hey, but I disabled everything and I can still use Temu. So why do you need all the things then? Like, if you're not allowing Waze for your location, I'm just taking Waze back as an example, you can't use Waze because it doesn't work. You need the location for driving, right? Or for navigation. There, you can just disable everything and it still works. So that was different thing. And now now it's like, okay, you say, hey, you can't enable your notifications, and then you get more more credits, or you get an extra spin on the Wheel of Fortune, or
Mm.
whatever, those kind of stuff. Uh, but it's more transparent, that it shows the pop-up rights. So after you open the app, it's like, and I think one of the things is, I think, for example, camera is now only when you send back stuff, then the rights are required, which is normal.
Yeah.
So I think they fixed some things which they found okay, and also there is an open source. It's called Joe Sandbox, and there is like an open community which tests APK files. So Android app files, it tests them based on malicious, and it gives them a score. And I think the version I tested first, the 1.4, 1.5, had a score of 43 F,
Mm.
dangerous. And now they have like a B grade. So they really went
Okay.
from, so they, yeah, it's less intrusive. Let's
Yeah,
call it
yeah.
that way. Less intrusive, less malicious code parts, and a little bit more cleaned up.
Yeah, because I think that we first had contact after you went on a podcast. I think
Yeah,
with a lady from a Dutch consumer organization.
yeah, yeah.
And you actually in the interview you mentioned they've been improving a lot, and they totally skipped over that part, and they just kept focusing on all of the things that were wrong. So that's why I was very interested in doing this interview and have you give you the
I
opportunity to also
Yeah, that's
share a
nice,
bit more about what's been happening.
because the problem is like the media, of course, is searching for the drama stories. Like China is bad, but it's not always the case. But we just need to be honest and transparent. They fucked up some things. Just say it how it is. They went too fast. They add more than they actually should. Let's keep in mind, or hopefully it was in good intention, but we
Mm.
don't know. But actually, they're doing the parts and they're doing the stuff to make up for it. So for me, that's improvement. Listening, changing, and like, I think Rome wasn't built in one day as well. Like you can't have, if you see the first Apple product now, back then and now, it's a huge difference. Like all
Mm.
products go through a huge transformation. The only thing is, how open are you as a company, and how honest and how trustworthy? And I think there is where they can still do some work, and
Yeah.
they can still push a little bit on the publicity, uh, because they have a very aggressive marketing strategy. Also a lot of influencers trying to sell or push with with their products. They use influencer marketing, and just, hey, you get my, so it's a very good way of, let's say, pushing it to the general audience, but it's less control of like, who is promoting my brand, who is behind it. Like, is
Mm.
it a trustworthy guy, or is it just like some shady guy who wants to make money? So there is where I think they still need to build some credibility and trustworthiness in being a correct vendor.
Yeah.
For example, if you see with like, they have all the payment certificates and stuff like that. So the payment stuff is quite safe. If you request your money back, you send a picture, you get your money back within, I think, 10 business days.
Oh, no, I've done it a couple of times. I had it within 24 hours.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay, I think they changed. I tried it last time.
Mm.
It's like 20, and they'll, unless if you get it like on your account, but if you like want a refund to, but it can be at your bank as well. But at least like, that is for me the basics. You give someone money, you send something back, you get your money back. It's fast. It's like, if they don't deliver in time, if they can't make up the promise, they will refund you, or they give you a coupon from €5 or something like that. So they're doing a lot of things to making sure that you as an end user don't feel mistreated, or doesn't feel mistreated. The only thing is like, how can they make sure that it's more a general connotation about China, that we trust them,
Hmm.
and that like nobody's having malintentions, or that, because there were some stories, and that we weren't able to verify nor dismiss them, is um in the beginning, and you see a lot of them on Reddit, so that you don't know what the trustworthiness of that is. Like, there were some experiments, and were US guys who created, like, you can create in Revolut or any online banking, you can create those temporary cards, right? So like a
Hmm.
one-time use. And they, like, debit Mastercards, they filled in those debit Mastercards, and like suddenly the card was fraudulent. So it was hacked somehow. They only filled it in there in the beginning version. but doesn't mean that they intentionally did something wrong or that the banks blocked it. But there is a lot of like, there were a lot of things happening, and people were like, okay, but are we going to trust you with our money and our data and our buying behavior? Because it works quite well. It works quite well. And that is the scary part. The same for TikTok. It works fucking good.
Mm.
Like they know what you want to see. Eh? They only have a very short time span. So like TikTok is pushing the right media to you. Same as Temu. If you use it a few times, you get the products you're interested in. Oh, like
Yeah,
oh,
yeah, yeah.
garden stuff, like oh, baby stuff. Like it really gets your persona right. And that is also what made the switch back then with Google, why it was suddenly because they know too much. Yeah,
Mm.
but it means that it works quite well. Like there were a lot of experiments done in Google. You remember, like you think about something or you talked about something, and suddenly you see an adverb of
Mm.
something, and
Yeah.
like everyone was like, "Hey, Facebook is listening to me," and they did a lot of experiments about that. So they put journalists in a closed room. They talked about cucumbers or tomatoes or whatever, and they didn't saw any ads. And what
Uh-huh.
happened is because their algorithm just works fucking good.
Yeah,
If you're
yeah, yeah.
talking about, let's say, biking, and you're talking to your friend, probably your friend is interested in biking, and that kind of graph network of your friend who searches a lot of on Google for biking, and it tells you the story for biking, and that's how they collide and they really like connect those personas. And I
Mm.
think Temo is the same. They're doing a brilliant marketing strategy, which seems quite intrusive for us because we
Yeah.
are not used to those kind of recommendation which are quite right.
Yeah,
So
correct. Yeah, they're much further ahead with what they call interest-based commerce in China than we are here in the West. So it's those kinds of recommendation engines that we have come to be used to in apps like TikTok are also built into apps like Temu, and we're simply not used to that yet, I think.
yeah, and it seems intrusive, and I think there is the issue. It seems that I mentioned it before. It's like the illusion of power. Like I want to say yes. I want to be personalized. I want to have a personalized communication. I want to see because like I always made the comparison before. It's like imagine you're a guy and you're getting ads on Tampax or like
Mm,
tampons or whatever, like any female related stuff. You're not interested, and you will drop interest, and you will not look and like you want your ads to be personalized, you want your products to be personalized, only you don't want to give away your data. So it's
mm,
like it's really a balance between privacy and comfort, where we need to find the balance, and the only thing which can make it in balance is if we have a trustworthy partner in between, and we say no, we believe that they're doing enough effort. And it's the same with ecological products or stuff like that. We're not buying based out of value anymore, we're buying because we trust the brand,
mm.
because they're ecologically built or they have a cool story or it's a local shop, or that's why this generation is buying. So I think Timo should focus on how can we build trustworthiness. And
Mm.
I'm not even talking about like how the products are made.
Yeah,
Eh? So that's even a different story. But it's important, I think, from a reputation point of view, that we gain trust. Uh, from a
correct.
technical point, I'm already
Yeah.
more confident than before.
Fully agree. And they still have some work to do as far as trustworthiness is concerned, not even just from the technical point of view.
Yes.
Now, Vincent, we both have a background in marketing. I
Yes.
also used to be a CRM specialist and a database marketer. Like you said, you've also worked on that side. One of the things that you've mentioned a while ago, you said that if these products are so cheap, then they probably don't make any money on them, so they must be making their money somewhere else. And you sort of insinuated that they must be selling your data then. As one of the reasons why I contacted you, because we spend a lot of time at TechBoss actually looking into the business model. And as I said, we'll be sharing our previous reports with you. But after also having had contact with Temu, is that still something that you think is the case, that they
Uh,
are
it was
basically like a data broker or
it was a personal opinion, eh? And I also
mm,
mentioned it, and it's that was just like the basic marketing I was learned always. Like if it's free, you're the product,
mm,
and it looks like it. And in many cases, because the investigations we did, for example, with Google, and it was a very simple thing. If you see two data brokers, and you go to any media website in Belgium, Het Laatste Nieuws, the Gazette van Antwerp, like any major newspaper in Belgium, you can go into the source code and you can see in the network tab like how much they're selling you to an ad bidder. So you're seeing that your contact is worth 20 cents, or 18 cent or 4 cent, or depending on like how many million of views yeah. But you're seeing that they're making like 50 to 100 euro on a profile on a month. So it means that like I'm the value of 50 euro or 100 euro. And it means that they're making a lot of money. And that's what we saw like last 5 or 10 years, that data was the new gold, and everyone wants to have a lot of data. And it doesn't matter like if the company was making a lot of money, but if you know as much as as possible, it's quite valuable. I mentioned it in the beginning, there is a kind of acquiring cost to get a customer, and it's a marketing cost. You foresee it into your marketing budget. How much do I want to spend as a company for acquiring a new customer? And it's 50 euros, 100 euros, sometimes 5 euros, depending on the value or the margin of your product. I mentioned it for a car, it's around 150 to 250 euros on a $80,000 car. If I see the value that Temu spends on acquiring a new customer, it's around the same. So they can never in lifetime get the value from me as a customer back what they spent, the initial spend. So that was why my basic economics and my marketing skills, then I'm thinking like, okay, but how can they make money? It's it's very cool that you guys did an investigation, because it's like in Europe, it's forbidden, it's illegal to sell with loss. You can't sell a product with loss, only in promotions, and so there are very strict rules also to enhance fair competition, especially in Belgium. There is only like one period a year or 2 periods a year where you have sold them, so there you have like major discounts, but it's the only time in the year you can sell your product under your purchase price. Else it's not possible. You can make loss in your company, but to a certain extent. After 1 year, the fiscal government or the government would say you're bankrupt. You can't just push money into it, because if you're having a dying business model, at some point you need to have to prove that you're like sustainable and you can make money. So then if I'm looking to this kind of business model where you say, okay, they will probably have a, let's say, assume out of good faith, they will push in a lot of money and they say we go very fast, we don't care how much we're spending, but then you have like the shipping cost. I think they're making money, or they're losing a lot of money on it. It's at least in Europe, it's 5. I think you mentioned. How much was it?
Currently, in a model where they ship packages from China, they lose about 20%.
20%. So it's really a lot. And then you have a part which is not sent back or returns, but then like every e-commerce has that issue. It's like 20, 30%, maybe it's more in Teams, maybe 40 or 50. I know people who just order stuff, look through it, and I say, no, I say return it. So they're like a majority of their shipments are getting returned. So the eventual net profit is a gigantic loss. I can't imagine anything else. And then I'm just thinking like how, if on a product of 2 euros or $2, I get free shipping. It can't, I do all the costs, I deduct all the costs. Like it can't be made for $1 or 50 cent or 20 cent maybe, but then it's quite a, like, how long can you push this further that you can make or losing money? So that was my thing. Then in the intention of, or with the knowledge of, you have a lot of data of me, like 1 plus 1 is, is 3 at some point. So that was my worry. But I think you mentioned it clearly. I think there is some financial investigation you did as well, and it's a total different market and a different model. So it seems that it's not always the case, right?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that we should take into consideration, just like they did on the Pinduoduo app in China. A lot of their user acquisition is actually being done by sort of a member get member scheme. Like once I download the app, I can get a free product if I get 5 other people to also join the app, and
Referral.
that referral lowers their customer acquisition cost. They are subsidizing part of the sales price, or the total cost of actually getting it to you, and the logistical costs, basically to buy market share. They want to grow very quickly, and over a couple of years, they will try to become profitable in various ways that we'll also
Yeah.
discuss on Tech Was China. So,
But in Belgium, if you would do it in
mhm.
Belgium, it's illegal.
Yeah, but if you
But
say
it's
you
unfair
cannot.
unfair competition.
Yeah, but if you say you cannot sell with a loss, is that loss based on the product cost or includes every cost, all of the cost? Because at the end of the day, any startup will always start with being unprofitable, right? With
Yeah,
because
but
of customer acquisition costs, etc.
it's direct cost. So, for example, I'm an e-commerce, and I have a purchase cost of $10 for a t-shirt. I can't sell it for $8. I need to make at least a profit.
Yeah,
Uh,
but they are
if
making a
you're
profit. They are well, let me say they are making a gross margin. They are
a
making a
gross
gross
margin,
margin.
yeah,
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 yeah.
but no profit, yeah.
So
But then
if they sell if they will sell a t-shirt for 10 euro, they might be buying it for 1 euro, for instance,
yeah,
from they're
so
actually not even buying it because it never becomes their property. They're selling it on behalf of the manufacturer.
just a
So it's a
broke,
very
yeah.
different, yeah, different business model.
Yeah, that's why it's a little bit strange to comprehend for us. It's like, okay, but how can you do it? And then because what I'm talked about being fair, and that is the thing. Like, I have a lot of friends who failed as a startup, like who had a great idea in knit their own scarves and making their awesome web shops, and with quite a lot successful sales, like even like Belgium designer clothing, which were quite successful, like 100 orders a day, 200 orders a day, very successful. And still after 3 years they needed to quit because
Mm,
it's just not profitable with all the returns with. And then I'm thinking to local economy, and then I'm saying, yeah, indeed, I understand why there are some rules where you can say, okay, prices needs to be fair. You can't make price agreements with your competitors. It's an open market. So we have a lot of, let's say, rules in place where we push our economy to doing a good thing and where we
mm,
protect, let's say, entrepreneurs to having a fair start. Like, I
yeah.
know that we are not going to make price agreements, so it's a free market. If you can make a product cheaper, you can make a product cheaper, and that's how you can build a fair competition.
Mm,
What I like about this kind of things is that it will force Europe to also review our price strategy and to make it better. So
mm,
I don't believe in like the super capitalistic approach where we are in these days. Like, if you have the opportunity to sell high, you can sell high. So it's good that there is open competition, but there should be some fairness in the rules. And it doesn't mean like there is a trend what we see, like, and it was a few years ago. Now AI is the hype, but a few years ago
mm,
it was blockchain was the hype, right? And in blockchain there was one cool thing which I admired, and it was like the open transparency of a full supply chain where and I'm not going to say the retailer, but it was a very famous Belgian retailer who did an experiment with the X.
mhm,
So they placed a unique number on the X, where on the website you could check if you buy an egg or a carton of eggs, and you filled in that number, you could see the full supply chain with the
mm,
prices. Because what happened back then is like the farmers were increasing the prices, or the middleman was increasing the prices, or the gross sellers were increasing the price, and the supermarket needed to change the prices as well. And the
mm,
Belgian retailer said, fuck you. We are not going to play that game. We are going to show transparently what each state would cost and what is the full flow of a product which goes from manufacturer until the
yeah,
end
yeah, yeah.
customer. And that was super awesome to see. Never saw the daylight of a lot of other projects. I think maybe the X stuff they did, but like, because a lot of parties will say, hey, but then you see my margin. And then you see eventually that the farmers who initially make the product, it's peanuts. And
Mm,
it's the man in the middle, the gross seller, who's making shitload of profit. And like, even the retailer, the margin is so small. So I think there as well, in the kind of level of fairness where you should ethical rules, in also having ethical labor rules and in creating fair products, there is something which we have some systems in play for that. And I think what I saw, and I think I saw it 2 days ago. uh I'm becoming a father, so I
mm,
thought,
congrats.
let's, yeah, thanks. So I was checking maybe some baby stuff, and I already had like someone who said, no, don't buy any stuff which you can put into your mouth because it can contain dangerous hazardous materials. And I said, but you're wrong. because like all of our plastics is coming out of China anyhow. If you buy it in a European store or not, it's still made in the same kind of factory. And now they added those cool like labels. I don't know if you
Mm.
already saw it, but like ABS, plastics and stuff like that, they have a disclaimer. This is the person in Europe who's responsible for this product. This is the test report, how
Mm.
it's not containing hazardous materials. So that's also kind of improvement that they did, where I was quite amazed in it. I thought, yeah, if I buy it from a Dutch web shop, it's probably sourced from from AliExpress. I don't know. They just added a
Yeah, yeah.
shitload of additional margin, and it's the same product. So they're building the trust.
I'm not sure in that product category if if I would take the risk, but yeah, I mean the assumption that everything is rubbish is of course also so wrong. But at the end
You
of
know
the
why?
day, I fully agree that we need to have a level playing field. Whatever.
You know why? And I'm just gonna explain why my reasoning. I ordered something off bol.com, and bol.com does the same thing.
Mm.
But my mother says it's from bol.com, so it's better. No, it's not. I ordered the same thing and I saw it on Temu. So I ordered the same thing just to validate. And it's exactly the same thing.
Mm.
The only thing is I paid 30 euros on bol.com and I paid 3 euros on Temu.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Right.
So the trust is also missing in European stuff. So I think by adding those kind of security enhancements and labels and disclaimers and assigning a responsible party for testing, we
Yeah,
are
yeah,
getting there.
yeah. Talking about getting there, you said that they started like at the F level and they're sort of now at the B level. How would you say? Of course, they have the fact being a Chinese app, they have that against them. But if you would compare that to commonly used Western apps, how does that be that they're at now compared to Western apps?
The thing is, what I mentioned in the beginning, we do security by default. So our, let's say, base plate, our core development, like from major companies, and I'm not saying like, but every decent app, there is a lot of like, if you program, it's only 20% of logic and 80% of if this then that, if this doesn't work, then like failures and safety measures. And the program is only 20%. So there we spend a lot of time if we develop something in creating all those kind of things. So in general, I think every major app or every top 20 app even in the app store is between C and A. So most apps are B and A. And how it's categorized is like if it's intrusive or not, if it can contain something strange, or if it requires a lot of you. So a lot of apps who don't require anything like a simple calculator will have an A, of course, because there is no personal data involved. So it can be that you have an app with a lot of personal data, but it's quite secure and still scores a B. So it's very those scores doesn't say a lot, but it gives an intent, like an impression. If it's like an F compared to an A, then it will say something, but it's
Yeah,
not
yeah,
that you can really score them based on each other. But in the beginning, the original version, and I think there is where the Grizzly reports have a table
yeah.
of the different Chinese apps. There is where they score terribly in the
Yeah,
beginning,
yeah,
and I think now, and that was also always their response. They're like, we are not worse than Amazon.
yeah. Mm.
But is that your strategy to become not worse than another company?
Yeah,
It should not be. It should be we are
yeah,
better than that. We are more open. We have a different way. No, no, we're doing exactly the same thing as Amazon. So that was their initial proof.
right.
But still, there were some things which were not.
Yeah, yeah. Well, good to hear that they're becoming more on par
Yeah,
with other apps. Now hope they can do the same with the product quality and they might be fine in the future.
yeah.
Vincent, if there is any other Chinese app that wants to launch in Europe and wants somebody to advise them, or any other company that wants your services, how
Cool.
can they contact you?
Just via LinkedIn. Just type in my name, Vincent Nys, and
It,
we'll have a cool chat. If you're friendly, I'm friendly as well.
yeah, yeah,
And else, I'm gonna be very honest and truthful.
right.
So
We'll include your contact details in the show notes as well.
thank you so much. Thank
Okay.
you as well for clarifying, because I think it's super important that we also have the voice on the other side, which is quite critical and looks as well in a little bit deeper and not only the sensational media. I think it's quite nice that you're doing that. So kudos and congrats for that. I think there is more need to having like really objective media instead of let's say the public drama media.
Correct.
Thank you so
And we
much for
and
that.
we and we and we need to learn more about Chinese internet companies in general, because we
I
don't
think
know
so.
enough about them in Europe. And I think we
No,
need to be prepared, because this one will not be the last Chinese app that is coming our way.
I'm sure.
So yeah. So thank you,
Looking
Vincent.
forward. Thank you so much. Take care.